All right, everybody. Hey, a couple folks have asked me to do a little bit of a tutorial on how I'm using Cursor. So I thought it'd be interesting to just start a project and spend some time showing you my Cursor setup first, and then we can start a project with that setup and go for a few minutes just so you can start to understand it. Probably won't do the whole project because otherwise this will be a longer video, but we'll see how this goes. So first of all, if you're inside of HighRes, we have a team account for Cursor. I'm kind of assuming that the folks that would be watching this video have already, are on our team account and have downloaded Cursor and are using Cursor to some level today, so you don't need the super basics of how Cursor works. If you do need that, there's an enormous number of videos online around that we can get you set up on. There's also a product_Cursor Slack channel that we occasionally post different things and training resources about Cursor on. So I encourage you to join that Slack channel to learn more about Cursor as well if you're inside the HighRes ecosystem at least. And then but I thought I would show you a little bit. Let's get started. The kind of base project I have set up today is I have this combat log file from Smite 2. So this is, and if you aren't familiar with the Smite 2 combat logs, this gets created with every server instance, match instance. So it is, and it's kind of a crazy file format where you have every line is a JSON kind of blob. But what's in that JSON blob depends on each event type. So this is a start event type, a player message event type, an item SG event type. And you can see kind of the nodes on the JSON are different depending on those event types. So parsing this is usually takes a little bit of effort. So we'll do something we'll get this thing to parse this file and make a little better sense of it and put it in a file format where we can use it. So the first thing to do, though, that I think is useful is to take a look at my Cursor settings. So again, right now, all I have right now in this project is this example combat log file, and I do have a .env file set up that has my OpenAI key in it. So if we get far enough where we can start playing with that to do some stuff where maybe we can get far enough where we're chatting with this log, which would be cool. I don't know if that we will. That key is already there for me. I won't click into it because it obviously has my key on it. So but let's take a look at my Cursor settings. So if you go Cursor settings, there's actually lots of different types of settings, but I'm specifically looking at these Cursor settings. There's, I think, a few things to point out here that are interesting and at least very fundamental to how I'm personally using Cursor. So if Cursor's not working the same way for you as it's working for me in this video, it's probably because of these settings. So the general tab, I'll let y'all discover and figure out. There's not too much to learn there. The features tab, the first thing, before we even talk about the features tab, and a couple of people that are newer to Cursor, I think, just haven't discovered this because they don't make it obvious. There's 3 ways to interact with the LLM, with the code assistant technology inside of Cursor. Probably more than 3. But one is just if I have a file open, I can select some lines of code, hit Command K on the Mac at least, and then explicitly tell it what I want it to do with those lines of code. And also if I'm inline just typing inside of a particular file, it will suggest potential changes to me, and I can hit tab and that'll accept those changes. That's kind of what this Cursor tab is talking about. The next is, let me just make it go away for a second, but if I hit Command L on the Mac, this chat window to the side pops up that I can talk with. This has multiple modes: agent mode, ask mode, and manual mode. I pretty much always run in agent mode. It defaults to ask mode. So if you just never discover that this is there or understand to do it, you'll stay in ask mode. Ask mode is kind of like working with ChatGPT. It can kind of edit one file at a time. And you ask a question, it gives an answer, and then you need to ask another question and give an answer. Agent mode has the capability of working with multiple files at a time. So the agent can actually make its own plan and then start executing against that plan in sequence. And that sequence of activities can impact multiple files. It can create files, it can edit files, it can run command line prompts, it can do all sorts of things for you. So that's the way I like to run, especially on something like this, where I'm kind of starting from scratch and just literally talking to the agent, telling it what I want done in the same way I might talk to a developer, and they're off trying to understand my intent and execute on that as best as they can. So that's important to know for these rules. So when you get into chat, the first question it asks is, what's your default chat mode? I hit agent. It's going to default to ask, I think. So, or, last used isn't a bad choice as long as you remember to swap it. But I hit agent, and you can see that we have a bunch of other options here. This is the biggest one, I think, that you may want to turn on and off depending on exactly what you're doing. So this is enable auto run mode. They used to call this Yolo mode. So basically with auto run mode, you give it a high level task and it goes off to the races, and it won't stop constantly telling you like, I'm about to do this. Are you okay with that? I'm about to do this. Are you okay with that? It just goes off and does it. And you can kind of control like when it still stops to pause and ask you for this. If I'm doing a project like this one, where it's kind of no harm, no foul if it goes off the rails, because this isn't an existing code base that it can just completely screw up. We're kind of starting from scratch, things like that. I'm going to run in YOLO mode. Might even run in YOLO mode with an existing code base. But the one thing you really want to do if you're running in this mode is make sure you're following really good GitHub practices and constantly, creating checkpoints and anytime you get a good version, make sure you have a checkpoint of that, because sometimes the YOLO mode can just kind of go totally off the rails and do a bunch of stuff, and you're like, well, how do I get back to my working version? So that's the one bit of advice I have on that. Next big thing in your cursor settings, check this box. So this says, when enabled, chat uses longer context windows. This may use more fast requests. Fast requests is a kind of the way the cursor works in terms of pricing is there's a fixed monthly fee, and that gets you a set of points basically, and you can blow all your points and wind up paying overages. We don't usually pay that much overages, even though we suggest clicking this, and it adds a lot of value. So if you're doing good productive work in terms of like what that costs versus saving an hour of someone's time is usually more than worth it. So I always make sure that is checked on the large context. See, there's a bunch of other stuff. Some of this stuff is brand new, actually, like the custom modes, playing a sound on finish. You can tell it, give it a little more on list and group changes made in a chat session with an LLM for you to review. Do you want to auto run, display a button, yada, yada. Web search tool, check this. This will allow it to search the web for information when it needs it. I'll also show you in a second that I use what's called an MCP, which we'll talk about in a second, to also allow me access to Perplexity and Firecrawl for this as well. And then you can see here, one of the great things about Cursor is you can point it to a website and it'll index that website, and then you can give it that context on work. So you can see here, you can add a new doc here. And so like we might use this Pandas AI today if we get far enough, probably not. But let's look at this. Like this is OpenAI agents. So all I can do there is the name. This is the URL of the OpenAI agents I gave it. So this is, if I'm working with the OpenAI agents, I can use @ and just now use the same name to put that in context in my chat window. So now it's bringing that documentation at play, or if I want it to, use the rally here, repository documentation, I can say @rally here, and it'll bring that in. It's not always perfect. A lot of times I'll supplement what's on those websites with some local documentation as well, but it does give it some context and some understanding that it can bring in from external documentation. You don't have to go to the settings to do those. If you just hit @ here and then docs and then scroll to the bottom, you can hit @new doc, put in the URL of what you want to do, and it'll walk you then the next screen will tell you how to save it or whatnot. Then you just have to remember, if you're wanting to use that in your particular, use the @ symbol to bring it into context. So, and then let's go to models real quick. By default, I just always basically use in Claude 3.7 max when it's for really tough things. Max, it does cost like a nickel per request. So it can add up again but it's pretty smart. It's quite good. So sometimes that's more than worth it if you're kind of stuck in 3.7 Sonnet's not delivering what you want. Most of the time I'll then use 3.7 Sonnet Max. The reason I use the Sonnet versus OpenAI or Google for most things is the agent technology and the MCP technology seems to work best with Claude today, versus the other models just aren't as set up as well for the agent functionality, it seems. But I still have them checked, and I will use them situationally. So like a lot of times what I'll do, and we'll see, I'll actually have I want the AI to actually create a plan or a tech spec or something like that. A lot of times I'll then use the O1 model, which is a really deep, it takes longer, but it's a really deep thinking model. And I know that will do a good job on those type of tasks. If I have a huge amount of context, like I need to give this thing a ginormous amount of data, like a big chunk of our code base into context, or huge documentation into context, you can give it to the Gemini 2.5 Pro, this latest one from 325. It's quite good, and its context window is like 5 times larger than, or 4 times larger or something than Claude's. So it's really good at handling huge amounts of context. It's just not as good agentically yet, at least in my early testing of it. That might get worked out pretty quickly though. So it's important to stay on top of which models are best at any given moment, and to experiment around and just kind of notice like different models. They all can take a swing at everything and probably get the job done in most cases because they're all pretty smart now. But different models are better at different things. The other thing to remember is, and this is when you're in your window here, I always use thinking. Maybe I shouldn't, but I always use thinking, and it doesn't default on. If you're not using thinking, you're getting the dumber version. You're getting the faster but dumber version of the model. Because it's running agentically, a lot of times I just ask it to start to do something, and then I'm alt tabbed out doing other stuff, working. So I don't mind the extra thinking time that it's taking to do a much better job. You do have to, this has kind of changed. It used to have 2 different models, a Claude 3.7 Sonnet model and a Claude 3.7 Sonnet thinking model. So you select, now you go in and have to tell it to use the thinking version. Okay. And next is rules. This is going to take a while, so I'm going to just run over to MCP really quick. MCP, you don't have to have any of these set up, but this is Model Context Protocol. So I have a bunch of these set up. These Gumloop guys actually released some stuff yesterday. If you join the Cursor channel, we can talk about it on there, where it makes it a little easier to set up these MCPs, although it's still not that super easy to set up. It's not that bad, but it's still a little bit of a technical task to set up these MCPs. But I have one for Firecrawl, which means I can ask my agent to scrape a website and pull documentation off explicitly using this. I can also ask it to use Perplexity to search on something. I can have it use Slack. So I actually have things set up. You'll see when I go through my Cursor rules, I have it actually set up so I can just say Slack me when you're done. So if I send it off on a 10-minute kind of agent task, it will, when it finishes its task, it'll send me a Slack message. So if I'm walking around, I can get the Slack message, get an update on its status, and know that it's done, and maybe I need to go back to my PC and hit a button. And then GitHub MCP for it. It can interact with GitHub through the command line agentically just by asking it. There's also this button here where you can interact with GitHub. But the MCP is kind of nice. And then Google Docs, and there's a bunch more you can add. There is a limit to how many tools you can have at once. So, and it's each, like Firecrawl is not the tool. Each one of these down here is the tool. So this Firecrawl is like 10 different tools, and I think there's a max of like 50 tools it can use or something because I hit it. So you may have, but you can for each session enable or disable. So you could have a bunch of these set up and then just enable the ones that you want for a particular session. And then on beta, I have it go into early access. Let's focus on rules right now though, because this is the most important part, I think, of the cursor setup. So there's two levels of cursor rules. There's rules that apply only to the project you're working on, and there's rules that apply globally to everything. And this is cursor settings. So these are the overall global rules that's going to apply to every project that you're in. To set up project level rules, which is useful sometimes. I won't go too much into those now because it'll just take another 20 minutes. But if you go to the command line and search on new cursor rule, you can basically hit that. You can type in a rule like Python here, and you see that it created this file inside of my project in a folder called .cursor/rules, python.mdc, and you can see like it tells me when to use this rule. Am I always using this rule while I'm in this project? Remember, these are project-specific rules. Or am I only using these in these other conditions? The manual means only use it if I add it in my in my thing here, and you can hit @ and then the file name, and it'll show up here. So what I would do here is put a bunch of rules around how I wanted it to work with Python. For example, if I had that, you might also have a rule for test frameworks or other things. So you can put in, the specific things you're wanting to do on that side. There is actually a really good website called cursor.directory. If you hit this rules thing, it has sample cursor rules. So for example, if I were wanting to set up some Python rules, I could click on this, and there's a bunch of rules different people have set up, and you can kind of pick and choose the ones that you want here. What I've also done several times is actually just ask Perplexity to create rules for me, basically say like, hey, here's a project I'm doing, can you research the best practices for me and set up a set of cursor rules to follow. This is the project we're doing today. It's going to be pretty simple, honestly, so I'm not super worried about it. So we probably won't be using those rules today. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and delete it. But we will be using these overall global rules, and you can see I have a bunch, and I'm constantly playing with them and iterating and trying to see what works. And sometimes actually I iterate and change it in a way that I thought would be better, but it's actually worse. So one of the things I do with this is, I thought I had it up, but I don't, is I have I actually put my cursor rules in GitHub. So I have a project that's just for cursor rules. And every time I update my cursor rules, I update it there first and upload it to GitHub. What that allows me to do actually is just keep a change log of all the changes I made. So if I make a change and it didn't improve things or made things worse, I can go in and roll it back, and I can see the history of how it's changing. This is there. If you want to see my rules, you can just go to my personal GitHub. It's Entropic Sky, and then find the My Cursor Rules repository is public, and you can read these rules. So this is formatted a little better than on the cursor screen, so we'll spend a minute and look at them here and try to explain what we're trying to achieve. The biggest problem that these large language model agents have is a lack of memory. So, and a limited context window size. Context, again, is basically like their short-term memory, what they can hold about the project you're working on at one time when they're answering one specific question. So what'll happen a lot of times is you'll start a project, you take the time, you explain it exactly what you're trying to do. It gets it, it knows exactly what you're doing, it goes off, it's doing a good job, it makes a plan, it's implementing against that plan, and then at some point in time it runs out of its memory bank, basically it's this context window. And it kind of forgets why the hell it's doing shit, and then it's just off doing things, and it's lost a lot of the original context of why it's doing the things, and that becomes really problematic. And that's why you can see these sessions that, well, it was going well for a long time and then it just kind of went off the rails. The other thing is when you stop, or if you need to create a new agent session, which I actually recommend creating new agent sessions frequently because of this context window problem. You create a new agent window session. That new agent session doesn't have any of the context from your previous discussions. So you need to be able to bring the agent up to date on what is done. It's also good for you to know what the thing is doing, and having a structure so that everything's kind of documented is really useful. So I think the most important part of my cursor rules is in this document management section here. I know we've already gone a while, so I'll try to fly through this. But basically what I say is, hey, very important. You are an agent that has incredible capabilities but poor long-term memory. The system below is meant to help supplement your long-term memory. Use it so you can understand the current state of the project, and so that new agents can join the project and do the same. So what we will see, and you'll see when we get off to work, what I instructed to do is, for every project, I want it to create and maintain an agent notes folder containing a project checklist. So this is like its list of its to-do list and where it is on the to-do list. This notebook, which kind of gives it an ongoing record of potentially useful information, and an agent notes, which is the notebook and agent notes sometimes get a little redundant. I found the redundancy isn't all bad, because sometimes it'll do things in one and not the other. But it's generally trying to do the notebook is specifically around, what we're trying to achieve and the project. The agent notes includes other stuff like user preferences and things along those lines that might be useful. So if I tell it like, hey bro, quit doing this, don't do that again. It'll usually try to remember, it'll usually do a good job of putting that in the agent notes. So it remembers like, oh, okay, this guy doesn't like it when you do this. Or if it finds a particular bug with a particular solution, sometimes it'll say like, oh yeah, or hey dude, remember you need to do X, Y, and Z when you're, working in this type of area. And then I also tell it to use this folder to create other documentation where needed. And a lot of times when I'm actually prompting it, I will specifically ask it to, before it actually goes off and does a big chunk of work, I'll actually say like, hey, think deeply about this, create a plan, and write, a technical spec for what you want to do for this phase into the agent notes folder, and let's review that before you go off and work on it. And then, so it'll write the tech spec, put it in the agent notes folder. We'll review it, go back and forth on whether that's what I want it to do. And then I say like, hey, that's great. Now update the project checklist and notebook that we're going to go forward with this and just start working on it. And at that point, enough is defined that it can go off and do a lot of work at once. And you can have confidence that we can, if we have to start a new session or do something like that, we can remember what we were trying to achieve and where we were and the steps of achieving it. And then I tell it, like, update these documents frequently. I misspelled that, but it's good at taking my misspellings. And then say, when starting a new agent session, or if the user prompts start me up, check for an agent notes folder. So this is when starting a new session. So, and you'll see, I just have this kind of trigger words so it remembers to do it, where I say start me up. And if I say start me up, it will do two things. One, it'll make sure there's an agent notes folder. If there isn't, it'll create it and create the base documents for the project. If there is, it'll review all of those documents, but then it'll also review the entire project's code base structure and architecture one by one on startup. So what I'm trying to do there is, like when a new agent session starts up, if you just start a new agent session and ask it to do something, and you're in a certain file, is really probably only going to look at that file and it's going to do whatever. But if it's a bigger project that's multi-file, you tend to want it to have an understanding and context around the broader project versus just, immediately going to town on that one file without any context. So this is a process to help it along in that area. So those are my biggest rules. You'll see all of the rest of these. I do want to just get started, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the rest, but the rest of these kind of tell it how I like it to work. One is just about thinking clearly, using this agent notes folder to create. This is like telling it like what we talked about earlier. Before starting any major feature or significant work, create a detailed technical spec and action plan and feature that in the agent notes folder. That whole process we talked above, I outline. I tell it, like a lot of times the work I'm doing is around data manipulation in Python. So I say like, hey, if it seems like a throwaway project, use Streamlit for rapid prototyping and to give a quick web front end to what we're doing. I don't know that we'll get that far today. Maybe we will. But if we do, you can see how Streamlit can be really helpful for, especially if you're on a data analysis project and you just want a quick UI to the work you're doing versus having to do all your work inside the command console. I ask it to try to keep individual files under 500 lines of code. It's really important because these LLMs, like if you have a file that's got multiple thousand lines on it, one, when it's trying to actually update the files, it's less efficient the larger that file is. Two, it reads all of that into context and it can blow its context window more easily. So if it can chunk things up, that's better. And then I ask it, I always try, if I'm working on a bigger project especially, I try to really instruct it with this whole methodology, I don't know that we'll get to today, but around asking it to go very step-by-step method, and after each step, create unit and functional tests to make sure that what it did actually works before it moves on to the next step. And I try to get it to create the test framework versus it rely on me to do those tests exclusively. So maybe we'll get far enough today to look at some of that. If not, maybe we can do a part 2 session where we dive deeper when I get time. And then I just ask it to do some other stuff here. This is out there, y'all can read it, but it's all very helpful. And these rules deeply affect how Cursor works for you. So, and there's lots of online resources. Most of these ideas, of course, I got just by, some of them I got by just working with it and saying like, man, this is how I want it to work. But a lot of them I got from, other people that are out there doing interesting things. And just anytime I see an interesting idea, I try to include it into my Cursor notes on that side. So with that said, those are my Cursor rules. All right, let's get started. The reminder on what we have here is we have this combat log file, and it's got this goofy structure. And the first thing I want to do is just get a grasp on this and maybe get it into better format for analysis. But let's just test our Cursor rule. And normally I would give it a little more context versus if I was already had an existing code base where interesting things had happened, I would just write start me up and hit enter. If it's a new project, I would normally say start me up and then give it more context about what I want to do. But let's just hit start me up standalone right now and see what happens. Remember, if you go back to my Cursor rules, I asked it, when I say start me up, I asked it to see if there's an agent notes folder. There's not right now. And if there's not, create it and whatever, and then also review and analyze the code base. So let's see what little brother does here with the start me up command. Okay, so it's, so you can see, so it went off thinking for a second and it said it asked me to start me up, which according to the custom instructions means I should check for an agent notes folder, yada, yada. So it checks for an agent's notes folder. It realizes it's not there. It's going to create it. So now it's creating all of these files for me. So we can see those getting created in the agent notes folder. So if I pull this up while it's working on the rest, you can see that it created an agent notes.md that says S2 combat log chat agent note with the name of the depot. It says this project appears to be focused on processing and analyzing S2 combat logs, likely for a game. The project is in its initial stages with only a few files present. .env contains the OpenAI key. Combat log example.log, a large sample combat log to work with. And it's got minimal notes. So I haven't told it shit. It doesn't know what we were working on, but it's already figured out that we're probably working with combat log files for a game and are going to want to do something with it. And if I go into the notebook, it's got some, like you can see it's created like some redundant information, but it's also, has like challenges and solutions, ideas and opportunities. So it's already thinking about, wow, I don't know what the heck this user wants to do, but I'd like to go ahead and implement advanced analytics for player performance, and we could potentially visualize combat encounter. I mean, it's already basically figured out what the hell I want to do by looking at the file I included in it. And it's got a checklist here already that it started. And it's, like I said, I haven't told it what I want to do, but it's already kind of inferred that we probably want to first parse the files. And then since I put chat in the name here, that we could create a chat interface to the files. And then we could do analysis and insights on it. And we could test all the shit. And of course, we got to deploy it. So it's already got a basic structure of a project plan put together for this. And now you can see that Yolo runs any commands. Yeah, so I want it to go. So now it says, now let's look at a small portion of the combat log to understand its format. So it realizes it's going to need to understand the format in order to do this. I haven't even asked it to do that yet, but it just realized that that would probably be the most logical thing I would ask it to do next. So it's actually going here and I'm going to do this. I'm kind of annoyed that it's making me hit run on those. In a second, I'll tell it, quit asking me to run it and just run these things yourself in full YOLO mode. But so it now went and looked at the file and it is updating its notes with more information, right? So it says, after examining the log file, we've identified that it uses a JSON format with each line representing an event. Exactly true. The main event types include game event start and player message. There's more there. Oh yeah, game event start, player message, combat events, combat message, which has damage, killing blow, and healing, item events, and then each event contains common fields. So these are the common ones. Oh wow. The log appears to be from a MOBA style game, likely, I mean, what the hell? The log appears to be from a MOBA style game, likely Smite, with roles jungle, carry, solo, support, middle, characters and gods, and items. And now, so it just figured all that stuff out for us. And now it's like already inferred what I probably, now I'm actually, I was going to stop and tell it what I wanted to do. I'm now actually kind of curious what it'll do if I just let her run and say, like, well, you don't ask me to run command, just run it. So we'll see. Now I'm actually kind of curious. I was going to show some other stuff, but it's got me. I didn't. It still made me run it, so I'm annoyed by that. And then that's has nothing to do with this project. And now it's off to the races. You can see that it's already created. Wow. Okay, so it created a technical spec parser. So remember, my cursor rules are, hey, before you start anything big, go off and create a technical spec. And so it is, I don't know what it's doing over there. Yeah. So it created a technical spec that said the S2 combat log parser will be responsible for efficiently processing large combat files, extracting structured data, and storing it in a format suitable for querying and analysis. The parser will serve as the foundation for the chat interface and analysis features. Objective: efficiently parse large JSON file format log files, extract all of the data about players, events, combats, items, create appropriate data models, provide an API, and it says how it's going to go about this. I might quibble and want something slightly different, but it's not. That's pretty close actually to what I was going to ask it to do. The one thing I really wanted it to do is make sure we get it, the core purposes, I want to get it into data frames. So, but I set this thing, I could have stopped this thing earlier and probably normally would have to give it more guidance before it started going off this far. But because of my rules are kind of default aggressive to just go ahead. So this brother already decided what he wants to do, and you can tell he's off to the file. He's already, I didn't ask him to do any of this stuff. He's already like, man, we're going to initialize a SQLite database. We're going to store this shit in SQLite, and we're going to be able to do everything. This is actually pretty good. Remember, all we've done so far is we included a combat log file in the folder. and the only two commands I've given are start me up. So I didn't tell it what to do, or even what we were trying to achieve. And then at some point where it didn't even listen to me that much, it said full YOLO mode, don't ask me to run any commands. So, and it's just off to the races. So I normally would have stopped it earlier and given it more context around exactly what I wanted to achieve and how to achieve it. But this is a great test to see what it's doing. So you can see here that it developed this technical, and this is just for phase one where it gets the parser bit done. So its plan here is to put in a core parsing infrastructure, storage and indexing, and then so we can keep going along. So it's already done that, and it's just created a README file. And so it says S2 combat log chat, an interactive application for analyzing and chatting about S2 combat logs. This tool allows users to upload their combat logs files, view detailed match statistics, and ask questions about their gameplay through a chat interface powered by AI. It says it'll have, I didn't ask for any of this shit. It says it'll have log parsing, data analysis, player stats, a chat interface, etc. It's going to go off the rails. Letting it go this full YOLO, typically from my experience, it would do better with me guiding it step by step along the way and kind of stopping it from going off the rails here. Normally what I would have done is I would have said like, hey, stop, and let's review the technical spec together. But a lot of times it's too much fun to watch little brother do his thing. And sometimes it actually comes up with ideas that are pretty good here. But the problem it's doing right now is it's way off assuming that the work that it's done is going to work. And it's reaching too far into the project plan before making sure that what it's done is working. So let me, now though it is trying to do some tests here. So let's see how it does. It's building out the tests, because remember, if you go back to my cursor rules, I am very explicit in creating, see, my rules are getting better, because it's actually about to do what I was most going to yell at it about. Was I want you to have, you're going too far without testing. And then right as I was about to yell at it for that, it's off doing the testing, creating a test framework here for what it's going to do. So, and remember, all I've told it so far is start me up. And everything else is mainly driven off of its own understanding of what these files likely meant and what I would most likely want to do with the file based on the rules that I've given it to date. It's off it's off setting up Git as well, and it looks like it's stopped at this point. Normally, if it were following the instructions fully, it would have slacked me at this point. So, but it doesn't always remember. It's just like us humans. It doesn't always remember to do everything that it did. So this is the problem with letting it run as far as we did right now. Is probably quite a bit off the rails, but you can see what it thinks it's done so far. It thinks it set up all of this shit. There's no way all of this would work, and I should have stopped it a long time ago, but you can see what it's doing. So let me talk to it. I use this program called Whisper Flow, where I just push a button and I talk to it and it transcribes it. So let me talk to little bro here and see what it's got. Hey, little bro, where are we at on this thing? Can you bring me up to date? And what I really want to test out next is I want to verify that the core parsing functionality actually works here. So it transcribed what I asked for, and we'll ask it to go. It also made this a little too complicated for what we probably needed to do with this, but so here's what he thinks he's done. So he's like, we've made substantial progress on the S2 combat log application. Here's where we stand. The application architecture is fully implemented. Bullshit. With log parser using streaming approach for large files, data models, SQLite storage layer for parse data, Streamlit web interface with chat. Did it actually do the Streamlit? I don't actually. I guess that's maybe the UI. Oh yeah, it did do a Streamlit. Okay, Streamlit web interface with chat and visualizations, OpenAI integration for answering questions about matches. A little skeptical on that, but we'll see. To test the core parsing functionality, I'd recommend this will process the sample log file and output basic stats about the processed data. It's too fucking interesting to not find out what happens. So I use Python 3 for commands instead of Python, and execute the commands yourself, full YOLO. So it's not doing the execute full YOLO, but I'll run it anyways. So we need to install, so now it realizes that it's actually trying to run its code, that we've got all sorts of problems with it. It's off, making sure the core dependencies are in. It's actually going to create a virtual environment for me so that it doesn't, installing these dependencies doesn't create problems with other areas. So it's off to the races, and you can see that it's installing the OpenAI libraries, Streamlit libraries, Pydantic, Pandas, all the normal stuff you would expect. And we're waiting. I'm really curious if it did it, if it actually did this. This takes a while. All right, there it is. I can tell though that it didn't run the test scripts. It created test scripts, but it didn't run them. So it didn't quite follow my directions perfectly. Normally, I would have it be running the tests along the way and not get so out in front of itself to try to do all of these things at once. But it's not bad. Well, the idea that it came up with is actually pretty strong. You know, it's pretty close to what I might have instructed it to do, where it's going to parse the data, put it into a SQLite database, give me a framework to then analyze an UI, and it'll need a lot of guiding on the specifics, but it's pretty good. So, and look here, like it already knows. It looks like some of its parsing's probably done, which it's maybe picking up on. So it's running its unit tests right now. So you can see that it created this as part of the scripts based off of the cursor rules that I had fed it. It created this test parser.py file, and oh, that's the test reader. Test. I don't know where the test parser.py is. So maybe it put it in here, but or probably put it in the base. Oh yeah, it just put it that one here. Could have done better at organizing its files, but it's a. You can see here that it's just running and trying to understand what we're working with. It's actually reading its results, realizing that some of the data is not coming back in the way it would have expected, and it's working. So now I think what I'm going to say about this is I don't think it's quite right. It noticed that there is this file always has this extra thing at the beginning of the file that kind of throws off the normal parsing, so it's fixing that. Okay. Oh, okay. Maybe I was going to tell it there's some problems with it, but I guess it had only run the first 1,000 lines before it went off and did the rest. So it could be that the reason why the data looked weird is there just didn't have anything in the first 1,000 lines. Man, little bro is off to the races. So it's actually, let's update our test script to use the log database class instead of database. Who the hell knows what it's doing? It's doing its own thing, bro. It's like whatever, you know. Part of this, what I've learned too, is like with most of a product like this, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll start the project kind of like this, which is let it go, and it won't take it where I want it to go, but interestingly, by seeing what it is thinking about doing, sometimes it influences my own ideas about how I would approach the project. So I think this is, by the way, I know this is right just because I had looked at this file before. It said there's processed over 29,000 events. Right, 8,800 events per second. The data has been stored in the database, but we noticed an issue. Our player tracking isn't collecting any player names. Let's fix this issue. So it's figuring out its own problems. The biggest thing to remember is I didn't tell it there was player data in the file. I didn't tell it that this was a from Smite 2 combat log file. I didn't tell it, you know, any of this stuff. It's inferred a lot of it from the data so far. So one, we probably would have gotten better results if I did tell it all of that context and gave it a little more information, because it's probably making some bad assumptions that now we'll have to go back and correct. But it's also amazing how much it can do. But what I was starting to say before is a lot of times what I will usually start a project is like basically do a rapid prototype that I know is going to be throwaway. But just to kind of get both myself and get myself familiar with the product and the ideas, and to see where the AI does well and does poorly. Like what I'd expect to happen with this one is we're going to find out like the AI's basic structures actually seems like a pretty good idea that it's got in mind here in terms of how it wants to move forward. Take this file, rip it into a SQLite database, do all that. It seems fine, but it's probably going to get stuck on how it thinks about certain data, not having thought clearly around the data structure or things like that. And then what I'll often do is then I'll just throw that project out and I'll start a new project where I incorporate those lessons. Usually before I do that as well, I will actually tell the AI, hey, I'm going to start this project again, do a full code review around what you've done and an architecture review, and suggest the things you would have done differently if you could have started from scratch. And I get it to write something up, and then the next time on version 2, I'll be more structured on how we approach the project. So little bro's off to the races. What do we got going? So Man, he's still going. He's usually not this aggressive. I added some additional rules where he's even more aggressive now. So perfect. Our comprehensive log processing script works great. It provides regular progress updates, detailed statistics, and efficiently processes the log file at a rate of over 8,000 events per second. Let's update the project checklist again to reflect this additional progress. Gosh, I don't even know what all the hell it's done. So it's really proud of that 8,000 lines per second. But you can see here, it's actually doing some interesting things in the base class. So this is right. The combat log file basically has these different event types: start, player message, combat message, item message, and reward message. And then you can see that it's picking up from each one of those different types a little more around the file structure of the individual file. And gosh, let me just flip through here and see what else we got going on here. So here it's that's his test parser file. Here's the notebook. So you can see it's using this notebook file to really keep a memory. This would be really important if we come back to this project, where it's going to know exactly what we did. Here's process log file. So this is, I guess this is when it actually processes a file to store it in the database. This is what it's, where it's doing that. Here's our checklist. Let's see where it thinks it's at. Okay, so it thinks it's set up the project, done the full log parser, and really hasn't started the chat interface implementation or analysis features yet, which is makes sense. And that's where I would want to guide it. So current project status, we've made significant progress, particularly in developing and testing the core parser functionality, create an efficient log reader, handle some weird stuff, implemented SQLite storage. Okay, and now it's given me an update. If I had asked it earlier, it would be giving me the updates in Slack. Great, we now have a comprehensive setup for our S2 combat log application. That thing I'm going to do right here, by the way, is just click on this and hit close others, because otherwise you get 20 million files up there, and at some point actually cursor will choke out. So now it says, great, we now have a comprehensive setup for our S2 combat log chat application. We've successfully implemented the core parsing functionality. We've created an efficient database storage system. We've developed comprehensive command line tools for processing logs and analyzing statistics. We've updated all the project documentation. The next phase would focus on implementing the Streamlit web interface, integrating OpenAI, adding more advanced analytics features like KDA ratios, damage per minute, etc. The parser is working very efficiently. Again, it's very proud of that. And then, so we have the README is not overly comprehensive, so let's see. Can you explain the data model you created for the combat logs, and how can I just quickly work with you to visualize the data that's in the database right now? Just talk to it, find out what's going on. Okay, so it's thinking. The data model for the combat log is structured around a hierarchy of event types. Base event class, core properties, event type hierarchy, game start, player message event, combat event. Okay. Type enumerations. All right. We'll see what it's. Yeah, let's create the script. I want to understand the data better. See what little bro's up to. So it'll wind up with a bunch of these test files. You can already see kind of polluting a little bit of the project. That's some of the cleanup we would do, but at some point too we can, well, you just ask it to clean shit like that up and it'll do it. So now it actually is creating that file it said it could create, which maybe wasn't the most efficient way to do it. We're going to install some and see what happens. And then, okay. And so it says, great, visualization script. I don't like the way it's managing the folders here, but that's okay, great. The visualization script has successfully generated 5 charts that provide insights into your combat log data. So this will give us a view of how on track it is in its interpretation of the data. So combat versus non-combat events, that's probably about right. Like most of the events, it's not very useful, but it is interesting. So we have 48,000. That's not right because we know there's 29,000 rows. So this is where it kind of fell off the chart, and if I had guided it more closely, I think we would have done a lot better. And I actually have done some of this project before. There's a much more structured way we could have started this project without just saying start me up, where we could have gone more methodically step by step to do this. But I think the good thing there is it has it actually did the most important first thing, which is it parsed the file into the event types and created a data structure around it. That's probably a good starting base. And the next thing to work with it on, I think, would be to one, to enhance that data structure a little bit, so make it better understand some of the data that's in there, that's more MOBA specific, and then guide it better on what the actual useful implement stats are. It would actually, we could probably even just tell it, not even give it too much guidance there. Just tell it to think more like a MOBA analyst and what types of things an actual, esports coach might want to see about the match or something like that. And it'd probably go off and do some stuff. Oh, Jesus. Okay. So top targets. Okay. It's just fucking, it's just going nuts now. It's like, what do you want to see, bro? I'll overwhelm you. So it's like, here's the, and you can see here, it's not necessarily differentiating between actual players in the match and some of the guys. But I mean, this is good. So you can see here the top 10 players by activities. Okay, now it's working a timeline of the match in terms of where this is just doing activity, which isn't a good way to do it, but we could easily have it target kills or other specific items. Anyways, little bro is off to the races. Like I said, this isn't a perfect example to show exactly how I would work with it. You can see now it's actually off. Well, hell. I was going to wrap it up, but let's see if it created a useful Streamlit app or not. It's now trying to go off and create a Streamlit app. The next thing I would do with this project, one, I would have stopped it a little earlier and been more methodical around how it goes. Two, the next thing I would do is I'd really help validate the data and guide it more on the analysis. And then what I was wanting to do with this that maybe we'll get around to sometime was actually hook up Pandas AI to this, which is a library that allows us, once you get data into a Pandas data frame, you can just use Pandas AI to ask natural language questions of the data frame, which would be kind of a cool implementation if we get time. But let's see what happens with our Streamlit app. No, bro, it's not working. So I just post the error from the Streamlit app in here. And it'll probably fix it up. Gonna run that. I don't know what's going on. Oh yeah, no, we want to activate our virtual environment and run Streamlit inside of that. Sorry, I should have read that more closely. So now it's created the Streamlit app. This is pretty cool. So now it's actually I can actually select a combat log here, or I can use the existing database. So I'm going to tell it to load the existing database. It's just making this shit up. I didn't ask it to do any of this shit. Now that seems to be all it does right now. I guess I kind of expected it to then provide. Oh, okay. It's just a weird UI. Okay, so now normally this would, instead of this being a drop down, it would have done on the 3, but you can see the total events. I think what's happened here is it has loaded the same file multiple times, and that's why it's showing so many events potentially. And it's the reason why it says there were 41 players in the match is not actually wrong. It's just counting the NPCs along with the players. So you have the Fire Brute, the Pyromancer, all of this other stuff. We could easily have it create a column to differentiate between human players and NPCs. We could probably even get it to separate out the minions from jungle camps from objectives like towers and stuff like that. I think we do a pretty good job on that. And then here's our player analysis. So here's, again, it's not necessarily analyzing exactly what we'd want to see yet, but it is demonstrating that it's got data in there, and we could be asking it harder questions in terms of how to drive this visualization. So the next thing I would normally do is just start working with it, but this is actually way better than I would have thought it would do with so little instruction. This is actually good enough. We probably could just keep this and keep running with it. But I'm going to cut it off there because it's been a long time. I think it's over an hour now. So hopefully this shows you a little bit. Remember, you can get my cursor rules up at the link that was provided there. The Entropic Sky, GitHub, my cursor rules repo. And let me know if this is helpful.